My name is Megan. I've always been kind of into fitness. I played softball growing up, fell in love with it. Um, I went to college for nursing, dropped out of college because my sister was like, "Why are you doing this?" I told her I was safe and it felt like it was what I was supposed to do. So then she had me come work for her as a coach because I really was into fitness and I loved it. And then I started training in person, um, opened up a gym, went to the online world, was in bodybuilding throughout all of this time. I have, I'm nervous. Uh,
Why are you nervous?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't,
So
uh,
no, you don't have to be nervous about anything. I know that it's often really weird to talk about yourself and your accomplishments, but like
yes, it is.
you're a pretty accomplished person. Like you're pretty successful despite having dropped out of college and listened to Aaron, even though listening to Aaron is usually the best for you. But no, I think that we can definitely just start from like the ground up, right? So
Yeah.
what was the motivation outside of Aaron for actually dropping
Yeah.
out of college and like taking that risk on yourself? So before entrepreneurship, you took a gigantic risk dropping out of college and pursuing something. Like, what motivated you or convinced you to do that?
Uh, Something in my gut was just telling me that like working in a hospital and doing what I was going to school for wasn't what I really wanted to do. I saw my dad, he was an entrepreneur. My sister was in the world of doing that. I was watching her, but I just felt like I couldn't do that. And with Erin, my sister, telling me that there was belief that I could do what she was doing, and when she was just asking me questions and interrogating me on how I was in school for safety, I really got to see that I wanted to go after that and try it on my own. So I just took the leap of doing it, and since doing that, I was able to dive into the world, start coaching, and then once I got a little bit of getting to experience what it was like to do it, I was like, oh, okay, I will always be able to be an entrepreneur. I will always find my way through doing this. But the original like cutting to being able to say, can I do this? Yes or no? Should I go the old programming was terrifying.
Yeah, I think that I've had a few instances in my life where like I've had to really like make a yes or no black and white decision where it's like I'm either doing this or not doing it.
Yeah.
And like those are always like really, really terrifying decisions, obviously, but like dropping out of school, it feels like for me, that's something I would have never done because like you said,
Yeah.
there is that safety and there's almost that like that necessity feeling where you're like, I have to do this, right? Like if I don't do this, then I'm already a failure. Like that's how I would have felt back then. And like, what was that next step for you after you did drop out? So you worked for Erin and you coached
Yeah.
for her, and we could probably just like skip that because that's not as important. But like, when did you decide to actually like start your own business? And like you mentioned opening a gym, and like when was that
Yeah.
entrepreneurial?
So I only worked with my sister for a little bit, but it was great to open me up to being like, oh, this is possible. So I was training at an LA Fitness at the same time that I was working with my sister. And then I that's when I actually met you. I brought people over to Diamond Fitness and I was training there. And I started to like just have more and more of a clientele in person and building that out. And then after I was working at my sister's gym, Diamond Fitness, and I had my people, I opened up my own gym because I was like, oh, this is fun, like to see how you can create your own facility. I wanted to chase that. I felt that was the dream to have your own gym. Like it was just like, oh, if you have your own gym, you've made it. Like that's the hierarchy of being a personal trainer. And then I found out it wasn't. Like it was not fun at all.
Owning a gym is so hard. Like, we're both friends with Eric Miller, and he owns
Yeah.
Four Barbell. And every time I'm in there, I'm like reminded how little I ever want to own a gym. Like, I never want to do it. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like whenever I was a young personal trainer and I was interning and I was doing group classes and, I was working for minimum wage, like that felt to me like the pinnacle of like what the career path would be.
Yeah.
And like whenever we met, you were you like mostly you're fully online back then, right? Like you never really did too much in person.
No, I did quite a bit in person. I was fully in person for 3 years, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do I feel like you were always online? Maybe some
I was taking some online clients at the time when I was at Diamond Fitness. But so when I was in college, I was also documenting my entire fitness journey when I was going through school. I kind of did this like gym douchebag of being like, oh, I'm in school, I'm working, look at me meal prepping everything, I'm better than you. I'm just gonna flex on you on Instagram.
Megan was the ultimate IG
That
back in the day.
that was me. And I started that though, and I was posting because that was also something my like Erin was big back in 2013 on the fitness world of Instagram. And I was like, oh, I should probably just start documenting my life too. It seems like that's the way to do this. I'm really grateful that I did because I got to take people with me from being in college and all the way through that entire fitness journey. But I wasn't taking clients. I was just being a douchebag and flexing on people for quite a while.
Maybe that's why I thought, because like you built like a relatively large following, like like pretty early on, right?
I had I got 30,000 around like in about like a 3-year period of growing it from college to when I opened my gym. I was like around there. And then after I moved to Austin, it climbed from like 30 up to around 90,000 at that point.
Yeah, I do remember that. I remember that you had that explosion, and
Yeah.
at that point we knew each other. But like, how did that, if it did, how did that affect like your life at all? Because I mean, for me, I'm like just a little fish in a big pond whenever it comes to
Yeah.
social media. But even something from like 30,000 to like 90,000, 100,000, like that, there's a lot of people looking at you all the time. Like,
Yeah.
did it affect your life in any meaningful way?
I definitely became addicted to the climb and the chase and status. That found a lot of validation through that. Anything can become addiction. I realized that very quickly with it, and I felt like I hacked the algorithm. Like that was my vice. It was how do I keep playing this game? And there was so many videos I would have that would hit 1 million views back in the day with how the algorithm was working with swipe videos. It was intoxicating. So yeah, there was a period of time where I had to do a decent amount of shadow work after it to see that I was thinking my worth was, oh, my social media is no longer growing because it went so fast. Does that mean that I suck as a person? Does that mean that like I'm now like losing in life because I put so much into that? And that was definitely awesome to see. And it was very addicting too. Like I feel a lot of that.
Yeah, was there like a lot of, I mean, speaking personally, I could see how this would happen with me. Was there like a lot of identity conflict going on there between like what was happening in the real world versus like your online persona?
Yeah. Yeah. I created a niche for myself that I couldn't then come outside of the box. Like that was hard to not conform to any time I would show up because it was like, okay, if I show up this way, people may, they may unfollow me or they may like say that I'm not on the pedestal that they once put me on. And that was terrifying. And now I love taking myself off the pedestal that people put me on. But for a while it was really terrifying.
Yeah. And like for me, again, just speaking from my personal experience and just kind of like my perspective on how I would approach some of these things from a very different level, because obviously, like, I don't have the same amount of followers that you have. So it's not the same amount of eyes, but it's still kind of like you feel a little bit of pressure to, like you said, continue to put on a front, put on a little bit of an act, especially if what you've done or what you've been in the past is like no longer who you are. Like for me personally, I used to be so fitnessy. Like that used to be my entire life. Like
Yeah.
everything I thought of was training, was nutrition, like was how what I'm going to do tomorrow in terms of training and nutrition, like how I'm
You're
gonna,
gonna get bigger.
yeah, like how I'm going to get bigger, stronger, like all of these things.
Mhm.
That's all I really cared about. And a lot of the audience that I built was back then. It was whenever I was really focused on those things because I was, posting a lot of videos of me doing like impressive stuff in the gym. And now that's like not at all what I care about. Like, yeah, I still want to be healthy. I want to like look good. I want to be strong, but I have interests that are like so far beyond fitness.
Yeah.
But there is still often that pressure to like post fitness shit because of the audience that I have and who I know that they are. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure that you feel that very strongly even now, even though you are still like kind of rounding that corner, like you said, you're getting to a
Mhm.
point where, like, I'm very comfortable with who I am, but do you still
Yeah.
feel pressure sometimes?
Kind of, yeah, I have pressure on thinking that there's other coaches talking in a certain way, and the way I'm doing something may not look that, and I'll go into my own cycle of feeling imposter syndrome in what I'm doing because it's not matching what somebody else that's in my eyes successful is doing, and feeling if I'm doing it wrong is like the question again and again, asking that.
Well, one thing I've always noticed about you, whether that was me watching and observing you from more afar or as we've gotten closer, become more friends, is that you have always just kind of figured out a way to do things your own way. And I've noticed that especially much more recently. So I think we can probably talk about like Metanoia, which
Yeah.
that wasn't your first business because the gym was your first business, but
Yeah.
but
No, my first business was Megan's personal training.
very creative. Very
Very creative.
I
And
love
then I was like, this knee was long. We should probably do something about it. So we took it down to Megan's PT. That was the next one. Also, like,
love it.
and yeah, I had those, and I was on my solo journey of doing that. And then I joined forces with my ex-partner, and we had a team together with assistant coaches, and that was cool. And I saw like how fun it was to do it with other people and to have assistant coaches. And then uh broke away from that, started my own coaching again. That's when Metanoia was born after three different already different businesses, and at this point before Metanoia.
Well, I feel like Metanoia was the one that really kind of like that was your own. I feel like you more or less like poured yourself into Metanoia
Hmm.
compared to what you had previously done.
Yeah.
And I definitely associate you much more with Metanoia. Well, back then I did. Now obviously you're pivoting, but do you want to just kind of talk about like what Metanoia was, how you built it, what you tried to build it into, and then maybe just tap in a little bit into like what didn't work with Metanoia and like why you decided to move on?
Yeah. So Metanoia, my baby with that, it's the idea, the name behind it is coming out of darkness and finding your light. And in that, I had my first assistant coach for the first time that I was taking under my wing, and I was still coaching for a while. And then over time, I started to see how many amazing different practitioners I could bring into this that would be assistant coaches that had an amazing set of skills, like outside of what I had to offer. So I brought in a dietitian, or a soon to be dietitian at that time. I brought in Annabelle, who she has kinesiology, and just like a whole different array of women. And in doing that, we got to build a sweet team together. And I stepped into being the CEO, got out of coaching completely with it. And it was awesome to see the community and to see how big it was. And I felt a lot of like, wow, I did this when I was looking at Metanoia, to see all of the women that we were helping and supporting. And I was in a role with it where being a business owner and being the CEO and no longer like being in the journey with people, felt I had lost my passion, my purpose for what I was doing. I was helping with like getting clients in, and like somewhat like assisting with the coaches, but I wasn't in the journey anymore with anyone. So I started to just notice where I was dropping the ball quite a bit throughout like being the CEO. I wasn't wanting to show up for things. I was wanting to just like shut everything down. And I was having that come up for me because I was torn. I didn't want to let it go. I saw also the ability to scale it. It was coming closer to like being a seven-figure business. And that was a big win. And there was all of these pieces where it was, I wanted to hold on to it so closely, but I knew that my heart just wasn't in what I was doing. So, about a year ago, actually, yeah, a little over a year and a half ago, um, just sat down with each of the coaches. We were able to both like connect into, and like they could feel that too. Like they felt like where I was at. They were also clients of mine. Like they were friends, and we just all parted ways with knowing that like we wanted to all do what felt best for each of us. And after that, my creativity exploded because I was able to see that I could go back into coaching and I could build something with not abandoning myself anymore. But it was hard to let go. It was really, really tough to let go because that was my baby. Like it was so special to me.
How long was it from the time whenever you really started to notice being disconnected until you actually like made that decision to move on? And estimate that. I know you're not going to be perfect with it, but
Yeah, I don't think I was telling myself like for a while. There was just it was subconscious things that I was doing. I had a virtual assistant at the time where I would just give everything to her. I wouldn't really want to look at anything. I would find myself like coming to what I was doing with work and being withdrawn and being very avoidant style to stuff. So I don't know when that realization of me doing it came about, but I would say I still existed in it for about 3 months of knowing that I needed to let it go, and like my avoidant attachment style in that became so strong. I was like, well, I can't let that go. I'm gonna just keep it over here, and it should be fine. But probably for about two months.
yeah. So 2 months to me is like nothing because like in my own situation, like I'm sure a lot of people probably understand this, but like, I mean, I've gone back and forth with like my circumstance to be like, do I want to continue doing this forever? Like, can I
Yeah,
continue doing this forever? Do I want to do something different? And I've had these thoughts for like quite a while, even back in 2021, where I was like, my sole goal with like trying to like accelerate and scale the business was like, I just want to be able to get out.
yeah,
And I've luckily been able to move on from that. I don't still have those same feelings, but like I feel like 2 months from the time you start really feeling yourself pulling away to like actually making that decision is like ridiculously fast to make a really big decision like that.
yeah,
Like that's impressive.
yeah. I and there was also just like it was existing in my entire body. I could feel like I was losing myself in it. It got to the point where I didn't like know who I was, and I would rather have had absolutely nothing than be in that place anymore. I could feel the feeling of letting everyone around me down, and that sucked. And I had to get rid of it. Like I had to do something to not feel like I was doing that anymore.
What was the process of you actually deciding to pull away then? So, I mean, if you just kind of want to walk me through that, like what did that look like for you? Because it's not as easy as like, hey guys, I'm quitting today. Because you have
Yeah,
clients that you still have to take care of. Like there's a lot of
yeah.
dependencies there. So like it like high level, obviously, if you just want to like walk me through what that looked like for you and like maybe how long it took you to actually be able to finally break free of metanoias where you could like start focusing on doing your next venture, your next project.
Yeah, I had individual calls with each coach and just I told them where I was at, asked them with where they were at. Uh, and we were able to establish with like the entire idea. We all came to just be like the best thing to do would be to allow the client to go with their coach that they are working under. We use Trainerize as our training app, so I paid for their Trainerize app while they took the clients under Metanoia, so that we kept the same like the pricing of everything until that client finished out their contract. And they just like it was the cleanest cut for the client to be able to go with their coach, still use the same training software, finish out the contract, and then they got to re-sign with their coach under their coaching program that they built out at that time. And it went really smoothly. Like pretty much every single client went with their coach, and it was all fine. And it really did feel like there was one day of sitting down, having everything done, moving everything around, and then it was gone. really quick.
And at that point, you weren't coaching clients, right?
No, no, not at that point.
So you basically went from stable income, stable, relatively stable business to like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like nothing.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
like that's ballsy, like really fucking ballsy. Like that's kind of crazy to me to think about that. I mean, just kind of going back to you deciding to drop out of college and like take a chance on yourself, you doing this, take another
yeah.
risk. Like, like I'm a waverer, apparently. Like apparently I'm not good at making hard decisions compared to you. Like I mean, I know other things with you where like you're very definitive in your decision making, which is like amazing. And yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of mind blown because I didn't realize, even with how well we know each other, that it was like that fast.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, if I have something in my body, my intuition that's telling me that it needs to be addressed, I feel like I really don't want to sit with that. But I appreciate the recognition to that.
Well,
A nice
what
compliment.
was yeah, well, what was the next phase of this process like? Like what did the next 6 months look like for you? Did
Yeah.
you really take some time to like refine who Megan is and what Megan wants, or did you just jump right back into, all right, this is what I'm doing now. I know who I am. I know what I'm trying to do. I know what my purpose is. Like, what did that next phase look like for you?
Yeah. So had to find who I was again quite a bit. I learned throughout having metanoia that I took myself as because I was with other experts as I don't really know anything. These people that I've brought in know everything.
Yeah.
And I lost a lot of, am I a good coach? Can I actually help people? And I had to rediscover how do I really help people? What is the strength in me as a coach? Because I'm not a dietitian. I'm not helping people with their strength training in this way. Like, how do I actually coach? So I took time of really distilling down what is my superpower of connecting with people, and I asked some friends around me, like, what do you see with my gift when you're in a conversation with me to feel what I'm bringing? And I just got to witness how even with my assistant coaches, with my clients in the past, my overarching thing was I speak so much belief into people and I hold them to their truth. And that's what I do as a coach. I ask somebody about their truth, and I call them up to that again and again. So, brought on a new client after closing down Metanoia. I was so scared. Like, I had worked with thousands of people at this point, but I was so scared with this one client. And I put so much of my worth into, if I can't help her to be successful, then I'm bad at this. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Uh, But it went amazing. It was a different type of transformation that I had never experienced at all with the client, where everything in her life changed. It wasn't just like back in my day when I had Megan's personal training, I was only helping people to drop body fat and build muscle. Uh, and that was really just do this, do this, do this. And then it was this client actually holding space on calls and letting her go through her process, asking her questions, and seeing how freaking good I was at challenging people and calling them to that. And I love it so much. And that's what I built. That's turned into after that client. I was like, okay, I'm building a brand with this. Like I'm stepping into what is the overall feeling. And my client at the time, I was asking her after we had went through them, I asked, what's alive in you from doing this work together? And she said, everything in my life feels nourished. And I said, I love that so much. I feel that. Like I feel the nourishment in you. That's the transformation that's happened. And I'm a Leo. You're a Leo. My sign is lioness. I love the symbol of lioness. So that's when I created my company to be the Nourished Lioness and reclaimed what I wanted to coach with.
So that's a perfect pivot. And so now your new company, new business,
Mhm.
Nourish Lioness, what are you trying to accomplish with this? Like, obviously the goal is much less superficial than losing body fat, feeling good in the gym, getting stronger, because that's kind of the world I live in, right? I don't say it's superficial necessarily, but it's very much surface level in terms of like the way the coaching is done.
Yeah.
And it's it's definitely not fulfilling every single day. And what you're doing now is taking a slightly different approach. It's taking a vegan approach, which is obviously uh, against the grain. So I would love for you to explain what you're trying to do and like where you see this business kind of going in the future.
Yeah. I am still refining this every day, I feel, with my women. I've gotten my roster completely filled to this. I feel I'm still doing some case study on what the overall like what we're building into. It's only been like a year now back into doing this, but I was building this out with the retreat that I want to host in August and thinking on to like what is the feeling. And I think that I really want to show people how to feel uncomfortable to feel comfortable. Like, what are the things in your life that you're not wanting to face, and being able to just lean in so that you can actually expand yourself to having so much more in your life. Because I see that being the common theme of there's something here, but we're going to ignore it. And I want to like call people to not ignore things that are actually feeling wrong inside of them, and being able to see that there's more if they're willing to look and connect and not gaslight themselves and shut themselves out in any aspect.
How are you going about doing that now? You mentioned a lot of like the calls.
Mhm.
Whenever you and I had talked previously, you had mentioned you have all these calls with all of your clients and like they're very emotional, they're very heavy, but they're also very rewarding. Like, do you
Yeah.
want to just kind of like walk me through like what a typical day or week might look like with you and like what you're doing now with your clients?
Yeah, I do a lot of connection calls with my clients. We do check-ins, and there is the overarching thing of health. So I break it down into pillars of how your life is going to make you feel the most nourished. It's taking care of your nutrition, it's taking care of the way that you do movement, looking into your period health, looking into your relationships, your self-confidence, how you talk to yourself, and with each of these different pillars, they're checking in with me. They're answering questions, letting me know how they're feeling. But when we get on the calls, it's just what's alive for you right now. And we go through wherever somebody's at, there's something that is feeling possibly a little malnourished for them. And we're trying to get the entire system. If your relationship is causing you to feel whatever it may be, then that's what we're going to be addressing, and making sure that we're getting you back to a place, formulating habits and how we're going to take care of that. Uh, and just really being able to say like, hey, this is something that I feel right now is kind of pulling me down, and let's sit with it.
Do you feel like that's been an easy transition, like a natural transition for you to make, going from, I guess, like the more quantitative way of coaching where you're looking at numbers, you're giving people macros, you're looking at
Yeah.
spreadsheets versus now it's very much like you're connecting with your clients? I can answer this for you because I know who you are, but do you feel like this has been a natural transition?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was good at like helping people to body recomp and change themselves in that way. And I still am. Like I still help in that aspect. But I always wanted to talk to I like back when I was doing that, I wanted to talk to my clients more. And I had this feeling of I can't talk to them about that thing because that's not why they are hiring me. And now it becomes like, you know, how I want to ask so many questions, and I have this little sister energy of wanting to know everything about somebody.
Yeah, I know that.
So yeah, it makes me feel really like I get to be the coach that I've always wanted to, and what I'm doing now, because I built this out to be able to do that.
And that's really a conflicting way of coaching compared to like what I see on a daily basis. Because in, I guess, in, not my world necessarily, because you're still in this world, but like I work with a very specific type of population, and like the coaches that do similar things to what I'm doing, it's
Mhm.
very, it's very much like a don't ask questions, don't continue like these long email thread conversations. Like if you want to get on a call, like pay $100 for my call fee. Like it's
Yeah.
very restricted in the way that
Mhm.
communication is done. And a lot of that communication is through data, it's through numbers, because
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to measure and track. And honestly, it's a lot easier to progress. It's you know what you're doing, especially like I know what I'm doing whenever I'm looking at spreadsheets.
Mhm.
Whenever it comes to like jumping on a call and like assessing someone's like their actual emotional state, like I would struggle with that.
Yeah.
I know for you, like that's a very natural thing for you because you're a prober. Like you ask a lot of those fun, you get people talking and you make people talk about things that they're not necessarily comfortable talking about, which for better or for worse, like that is kind of a superpower, you know, like allowing people to feel comfortable talking about a lot of those deeper things. It's
Yeah.
like that's really, really challenging, especially for someone who they might not really know that well. Like for a lot of
Mhm.
clients, they're probably not like your best friend, you know,
Yeah.
you have good relationships with them, but it would be different from like you and I having a conversation for
Yeah.
someone who, you know, you maybe been working with for a month and that they don't really know you that well.
Mhm.
So like, how do you build that trust with your clients initially? Obviously, over time, it becomes a lot easier, but like initially, how do you allow those clients to feel comfortable with you to open up and know that like you're going to be able to be there for them in the way that they need you to be there for them?
Yeah. That's a good question. I lead with a lot of vulnerability. I make sure that everything I'm being a mirror of to them is I would hope for them to have permission to do the exact same. If they have found me through social media or if they're talking to me about anything in my life, I don't play this role with a client where I am authoritarian. I will be in a really vulnerable spot and naturally I feel people just I hear a lot. I haven't told anyone this but you. I don't know how you're getting me to tell you all of this right now. And I think it's just because of the vulnerability that I'm displaying back has been really helpful.
Yeah, and that vulnerability is like really apparent if someone looks at your social media too. Um, like I don't know if you want to kind of go into some of that, some of the ways that you've been vulnerable on social media and like when you started to realize that like this was something that you should actually start pursuing rather than a lot of people really like push that down. Like they try and
Mhm.
control the narrative of like who they show on social media because it is something that you can control in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I feel like you more than a lot of people have kind of embraced like the more vulnerable, sensitive, and potentially difficult to talk about things about who
Mhm.
you are whenever it comes to your relationship, your body image issues, and things like that. And like, how do you allow yourself to like go to those places and talk about those things publicly? And then, like, when did you start doing that?
Yeah. I really started doing that right when I was building Metanoia. I had ended the relationship and that I had the team with, and I felt okay. I have up until this point, my entire identity was even growing. Like I was saying with social media, was I posted workout videos, I posted me getting super shredded for competitions, and everything was so fitness related. If you came to my page, that was what you're gonna find. And then I had my entire identity of leaving the team to start my own. And I felt like no one really knew me online and no one was like able to see me. So I started talking at that point of the relation, like ending the relationship, trying to rediscover myself. And the feedback of for the first time doing that, seeing how people wanted to talk to me differently felt amazing. It was the first time online that I actually felt like people could have a real conversation with me, not just how'd you get shredded? Like what did you do to the and it felt for the first time like social media became something to me where I felt like I had a friend. I had true connection on social media. Because up until then, I was just thinking social media is this toxic place. There is nothing but people having fake lives because I had a fake life on social media. And when I made that, I no longer wanted to show that I was having this fake life. I wanted to show the pain of heartbreak, and I wanted to finally bring to social media what I always wanted to see on social media. But I was terrified up until then, until I saw, like, this is awesome to receive that.
Well, one thing that I think, really despised about social media for a long time is how transactional it feels.
Mhm.
Especially if you're someone who is trying to advertise or like promote your business in any way. Like fitness is a really apparent example. Like if you're a coach, like you're going to post content, you're going to make educational posts, you're going to post videos of you training, you're going to post, pictures of your client transformations. And it feels very transactional. It's like you're doing this for a reason.
Yeah.
And the reason why social media originated was like for people to be able to follow people that they know and that they care about. They want to
Mhm.
see their lives. They want to see what they're doing. It was never meant to be this transactional thing. It was meant to just be a place where people could post about their lives.
Yeah.
And even for me, like whenever I post anything that outside of fitness these days, I'm like, man, I don't know like how this is going to be received because like this isn't really, why people follow me. But
Mhm.
for you, it sounds very much like you understood that early on, or maybe a few years ago, where you're like,
Mhm.
it can't purely just be like transactional on my part. Like, I just want social media to be a place where I can post about who I am, what I'm doing outside of fitness, outside of the gym, the things that interest me. And you realize over time that people actually do care about that stuff
Yeah.
a lot more than you have been like than you initially expected to.
Yeah. And it was like, why do I want people to follow me if they don't even know who I actually am?
Yeah.
That was a confronting question of, like, I want you to follow me because you have this fake idea of who I am that feels terrible. And I went to expos back in the day before COVID and when all of that was happening. And there were so many times I'd go to an expo, and the expos were other fitness influencers wanting to just take a picture to cross market and not even being friends. And it was so toxic culture, but also I was feeding into it because that was the game. And we played into, and it was the most mind, like, annoying thing because I would be playing into my social media persona at an expo in person, feeling like I was trying to live up to my own standard of what I made myself out to be online, that when I was meeting people, I couldn't really meet them. I had to play this character, and it was jarring for me to go through it and to see how disconnected I was through that.
That feels like it would be especially difficult for a woman, but also a woman who has competed and who is like really, really deep into like the fitness world, especially to like maintain your body image, like
Yeah.
maintain specific physique. And I can definitely see like now that we're having this conversation, how mind fucky that could be whenever you think or you perceive people only following you for that reason, for like
Mhm.
your body, especially if you're a woman who like posts your body a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like I mean, I know of people just off the top of my head where it's like, okay, well, if they're wearing clothes on social media, they're probably not going to get nearly as many likes, nearly as many views as if they're in a bikini, right? And I can imagine just like even something as simple as like gaining some weight, how
Mhm.
that would just like impact your headspace so much and really, like I said, be like mind fucky. Um, was there anything other than, I mean, that's a very tangible example. Was there anything like that that really made that whole like superficial transactional social media relationship more apparent to you outside of that, like the expos?
Um, just feeling like I was so lonely all the time with having was all these followers. It felt like there was a lot of people that were constantly messaging me, but I felt so lonely in that. That was another gut check for me of noticing where I like all these people, but yet I don't have anybody that I can truly talk to. Like that felt very disconnecting for me.
Yeah. And now you're obviously like posting a lot of different things. You're posting much more about your personal life, much more
Mhm.
about the struggles that you're going through, much more about like the things that you're interested in. And it feels less filtered.
Mhm.
Like it doesn't feel like you're portraying an image outwardly that you want people to see. It feels like you're just putting out who you are.
Yeah.
And even something as simple as like talking about your relationships, talking about like getting your breast implants removed.
Mhm.
like those are really, really difficult things to talk about for a lot of people, but you're very open about that. Like I want you to talk a lot about, or maybe a little bit more about like the breast implant stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe not a lot of people really know what we're talking about, just alluding to it. But what
Yeah.
issues did you have with your implants? Why did you get them removed? And, like what were some of the consequences of that? Like some of the things that maybe you're trying to deal with now to get back to normal?
Yeah. So going off of the image idea that I realized I had created for myself, I was able to sit with seeing how much my implants played into the character that I wanted to portray, and it was I compete, I have a big chest, I am in this body that I think is the most socially acceptable for me to get the most likes, to get the most attention. And when I started to see that I didn't even feel I had a connection to my implants, I didn't have health issues popping up for me with my implants. They were pretty big. They were not comfortable, but they were health wise actually messing with me. It was just a complete disconnect for my body. And I wanted to finally like not have something that felt a mask. I kept pulling mask after mask off in my life. And it got to a point with my implants where I was sitting there and I asked myself, is this really like, do I really have to let these go? I like them. How am I going to be like, how do I feel feminine if I don't have my implants? And again, it was probably about another 2-month period for me of deciding that. And I kept getting drawn into, but think of how free you would feel if you didn't have these. Think of how many times you feel people are meeting you and you're having your test be like met before they're actually getting to meet you. You can feel inside of yourself that you don't want to even have these anymore. And the only reason that you're keeping them is because fear of judgment, and not that they're not even for you. They're like, you have something on your body that's not even for you. And that was crippling for me to know that. And it was also the number one reason that it took me a while to finally say, I'm going to get an explant, because I had to do, I had to do so much of the shadow work to see, okay, what if I do all of a sudden feel like I don't have any feminineness to me? What's that going to feel like? What's it going to feel like if all of these people tell me I was way more attractive when I had my implants? What if it was just like one thing after the other? What's your worst fear? What's your worst fear? What's your worst fear? Finally sat with all of it and there was most that I could, and then decided that I'm gonna do it anyways. And once I get there, I'll face it at that point and feel into whatever I need. But I trust that when I get to that spot, I'll be able to hold myself. I had enough trust to know that I could hold myself together if I started to feel like this was the worst decision ever. I would figure it out.
And how did it go?
Amazing.
How
It
how
was,
Yeah, how was like the reception and like the feedback from other people? Because you did post about it online too. So like
yeah.
you leading up to it, we're definitely like letting people know that this was a thing. Like, hey, like I show up next week and I no longer have gigantic boobs. Like, it's like Photoshop. So,
Yeah.
like, how was the reception? How have you felt since then?
Yeah. And I show like I shared a lot online for not the superficial, oh, just getting implants out, get like that's it. It was, I want you to know my process of like, this was emotional turmoil that I was sitting in for a while. And that's what I kept showing up online and talking about again and again, because yeah, it felt like I was in that world for a while. And I got them out. Um Immediately, my body responded with saying that was the right decision. As soon as I woke up, or like I came back to consciousness from my surgery, I was immediately able to take a deep breath. I felt so much more lightness to myself. I didn't have health issues that were really happening, like I said, but I all of a sudden felt way healthier, like things that I didn't understand that maybe I was feeling. And I think it was honestly just energetically knowing that I had something that I didn't want and I was holding on to it, and then I released it. And that was actually what I started to feel the lightness to in myself. And it was right after my surgery.
And just to clarify, like you're not someone who is like demonizing implants, because I feel like this has definitely been something that has kicked back really hard recently, because you mentioned you didn't have too many health concerns with the
Yeah.
implants. There have been a lot of women who have more recently come out, said that their implants have made them sick, given them
Yeah.
all like internal issues. They've had them removed, and then they're very much like, get your implants out if you have them. Like, no one should ever get implants. It's very much like almost this battle going on.
Oh, the Facebook group for breast implant removal is the most toxic environment I've ever seen. Don't, if anybody's listening to this and thinking about removing their implants, don't go to a Facebook group, because it's doing exactly what you're talking about. It's demonizing women that have them and telling them what to do, and that's not what I ever want to share in my story. If you have like somebody has implants and they love them, it doesn't feel disconnected for them, they're not having a health issue, great. Like, you can keep your implants, do that. Like, I encourage that. And I did get pushback from that after, because I've actually experienced the same thing before removing my implants. Anybody that had removed them and they were talking about their journey, I was triggered by, because I had to face myself in that of their story to say, is it right for me to keep my implants? And I was really triggered that I would unfollow people and say they've lost their mind, like whatever I had to say to make myself feel better. And I've gotten some of that pushback since removing mine and talking about my story. And I see people in that. I was that same version of feeling triggered at one point. And if you're triggered by somebody's story on it, I would just encourage to ask why you're triggered on something rather than making the person wrong for that.
Do you see the parallels with breast implant surgery or getting them removed? I don't know why it's hard for me to say explant, but the parallels there with like that, and also like competing, or people who have stopped competing and then turn to demonize competing. Because for me, obviously I'm on the outside of the breast implant argument, but for the competing side, like that is so apparent, like how closely related those two arguments are. And like you went through both of those. So like what do you feel like those parallels are?
I think what I noticed a lot is, in order for somebody to evolve, they have to hate the thing that they once were, and they have to completely tear it down, right?
All right,
So with competing, a lot of people have went through that experience, and then they get to the other side. And in order for them to say, I am this new identity, they have to really, it's like hating your ex. You have to hate them in order to be the new version of who you are.
Yeah, what
No.
too is like, I think there's also like this aversion to acceptance, that you like fight so hard to actually see like what's going on. It's like whenever you were going through like these internal deliberations, like, do I get the explant? Like, do I keep them? Like, what's going on? At some point, you eventually were like, okay, like I'm convinced I'm going to take these out. Or you weren't convinced by someone else. You realized that that was something you needed to do. But I feel like for a lot of people, there probably is this like pushback, pushback, pushback. And then finally, after a long time, you like quote unquote see the light. And then to continue along that path, you have to demonize, like what you said, you have to like put down everyone who was in this other camp to justify your decision.
Yeah.
That's very profound, Megan. I appreciate that.
I mean, when you see that, you can tell it's, and you and Alex talked about this on your podcast. Until you have forgiveness for that, you're playing out your unhealed version in what you're doing right now. And if I had to hate the version of me that had implants, I would not be able to just embrace who I love that version of me, and I love this version of me. I love the journey I went with competing. And I'm also really happy to not be competing anymore. Like, it's just being able to accept that whatever somebody else is doing too, it's for what is best for them. Trusting that people are doing everything that's perfect for them at the perfect timing of their life, and not getting upset on what they decide is best for them.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned Alex and my conversation, because now it's really apparent whenever you say that, like, how this pops up in relationships as well. Like whenever you end a relationship with someone, you have to hate them, right?
Yeah.
It's like the only way that you can emotionally break free of that relationship is to hate them for a while.
Yeah.
narrative that you tell yourself that that's the only way that you can dissociate from it. That's the only way that you can break free and get away. Obviously, that's not true, but a lot of people do that because it feels like the easiest severance is
Yeah.
to not appreciate like all the good things or maintain like some middle ground where you're like, we both made mistakes. Like I'm still
Yeah.
friends with them. Like they're a good person. It's like, no, I'm going to delete everything about them. I'm going to block them. I'm going to tell everyone like all the shit they did to me. It was all their fault. Because that just feels easier. And it feels easier for other people around you to like reinforce everything that you're doing too and like build an echo chamber around all the decisions and actions that you're making. No, I can probably like expand this exact thing into a lot of different avenues, but like just because you said that with me and Alex, that just immediately popped to mind. But
Yeah, and that's why I was so inspired by you guys, because I've done that exact same thing up until my last two relationships. I had to hate that person in order to say that I could then be what I wanted to be. And it was a lot easier to hate and to not take any ownership, to wear that victim hat and feel so good, feel validated, and it like doesn't actually allow for you to fully heal though until you decide to forgive everything in your past.
well, I mean, just being a passive observer to a lot of your relationships over the past few years, well, I guess not a lot, but at least four that I could think of. I mean, I could, I could definitely see how you've matured. And like, even before we started recording this, like we had a conversation about like, your most recent relationship and like how you approach that and like the relationship that you're still trying to cultivate with him and how things are not toxic. They're very cordial, like they're very friendly. And just how I know your previous relationships have gone, like they've been evolving in a very positive direction. Like that's, I love it.
Yeah.
But
Growing up.
well, I think part of this too, and this is something that I've really noticed is a lot of like the maturity, it stems from like centers of groups of friends, right? Like there are a lot of people in the world that would never, ever, ever be able to be as emotionally mature whenever it comes to like relationships ending as like you are, or like I have been more recently, right? Like not always, but more recently. We're getting to that point, but I think that just who you surround yourself with, it like really filters down towards everyone, and everybody kind of has some kind of like role model or some ideal to look towards to say, okay, like this is how I should be acting. Like these are some principles that like I want to adhere to. Like when in every relationship, in every friendship, I want to make sure that I'm always like acting this mature. I want to make sure that I'm doing these things that everyone else would want to be doing in any kind of interaction. And it's definitely not normal. Like sometimes I have to like remind myself that like the way that our friends, we interact is not normal. Like most people aren't like that.
Yeah. We're lucky, we're so lucky to have the friend group that we are in, to constantly have conscious communication and checking in and knowing that every single person around is going to hold themselves to that standard and check in and take ownership and have difficult conversations. It raises you to be someone that in order to keep having that connection, you have to keep doing that same work yourself.
Well, I know that we really started hanging around each other a lot more like in 2020. Well, yeah, 2020-ish around then. But that was around the time for like I was obviously like, going through a lot of stuff. I was going through a lot of turmoil in my private life. Obviously everybody was going through like the COVID catastrophe and all that shit. So we're all kind of figuring things out. But I remember being like the 18th wheel, or I guess 19th wheel, got to be an odd number, for all of these like gigantic get-togethers and like couples parties, and we're like renting Airbnbs and hanging out and spending time with one another, and I'm like the only person who was like by myself. And it was very weird for me, but at the same time, like I was able to be more of like an observer to everything going on around me, and just being around a lot of the people that we're friends with now and like that we know and that we hang around with. Like it was just one of those experiences back then. It was eye-opening for me to just be like, okay, like maybe I should stop being a piece of shit all the time. Like I definitely don't want to like let all of these people down who like have higher expectations for me than I do probably of myself, And like there were even conversations that you and I have had in the past few years where I'm like, why the fuck is she even asking me this question? Like, why do you care so much about what I'm doing or like my situation? And it can be a little bit uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
to surround yourself with people like that, that like genuinely care, that genuinely like want you to do well. Um,
Yeah.
but I think that that's what you're finding in your work is that we all kind of secretly want that. Like
Yeah.
we want to know that people are going to be there for us, even
Yeah.
if we're fucking up and even if we're like doing things that we shouldn't, or if we're like, struggling. And like for you specifically, like that's something that I've always known you to be very, very good at is that role of being a listener, being like a good question asker. Like that's probably the absolute wrong way of saying that. You ask good questions. Uh, but, but no, I think what you're doing now is very much what you should be doing because like for me, I'm a spreadsheet person. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like a leave me alone, don't talk to me, like let me work on my computer for hours on end type of person,
Yeah.
like a connection person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very glad that like you're able to do what you're doing now.
I think you're also sometimes a connection person when you want to be. No, not true. No, I appreciate that. Jordan, my brother-in-law, he, as you know, but he gave me a reflection. Like this has been about 5 years ago now, where he told me my superpower is how curious I am on things, and I really took that and fully accepted that that actually is something that I want to be my superpower. I want to be very curious of everything around me. And I think the ability to go in and ask questions and you called it probe people, but I call it just asking questions. I think
You're cool. Yeah. Like you
I'm
said,
just
little sister energy.
it is, but it's from love. And I think that when you come into a conversation and you just have pure curiosity for something, I'm not attached to whatever, like when I talk to you, like what you're gonna share with me. It's just really wanting to like just to hear something with where you're at, with what you're feeling. And I think that that little bit is also what gives me the courage because I just can tap into being like, I'm just curious. I actually don't have an attachment to anything. If you don't even want to tell me, that's fine. But it's helped a lot to just know that it's not coming from, and I have to check myself with that too. Am I trying to get something out of someone right now by doing this, or am I actually just wanting to be a witness to them?
It's it's really uncommon to have someone be genuinely curious about you.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in our everyday interactions, it's always again, just going back to like I think the term transactional is like appropriate in a lot of ways. A lot of interactions, a lot of relationships feel transactional.
Yeah.
And it's very uncommon whenever you have a conversation with someone and you can tell that they're like genuinely curious about what you have to say.
Yeah.
And they're asking questions, they're like looking you in the eyes, they're waiting for you to respond, they're not cutting you off. They're
Mm-hmm.
they're leading you on in a way that is like allowing you to get deeper into what you're actually trying to say.
Yeah.
That's honestly very, very, very uncommon. And I think that's one of the reasons why, like, every time we've had like those multi-hour long conversations, every
Mm-hmm.
time I leave afterwards, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how did she pull that out of me? Like it is a superpower, like that curiosity, but also the ability to just sit and listen is a superpower. I'm not good at that. Like, I really struggle with that. And that's been one of the things I've been really working at with like doing this podcasting stuff is like, as the host, I'm trying to be better about asking questions and just listening and
Mm-hmm.
not interrupting. It's so hard for me. Like there's like this energy in my stomach that just like bubbles up whenever I want to say something, and it's so hard to
Yeah.
repress it. But I feel like for you, like you are in that natural state, just
Yeah.
being that poker, being that little sister, and like genuinely being curious about the people that you're talking to, at least from the
Mhm.
perspective I've seen. And I could totally see how your clients would be able to get a fuck ton out of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Do you feel it's getting easier for you to ask questions?
With some people, like, I mean, you know me, like I'm very closed off to a lot of people. So whenever I get comfortable with someone,
Mm-hmm.
I find that like the conversation is just so much easier. But it does take like that initial barrier being broken down until I can actually be comfortable of like having those deeper conversations, listening without interrupting and all of that. I don't know if this is like the right way of saying it, but I feel like, especially in a lot of like initial interactions that I have with people, it's very much like me trying to create some standard. Like, okay, like this is how I am.
Mhm.
I am someone who's going to be like, you know, not abrasive in a conversation, but I'm definitely going to assert myself in the conversation. Like, I'm not going to allow myself to be talked over. Like, I'm intelligent. Like, notice me, like that type of stuff. Uh,
Yeah.
and then once I get past that point of like necessarily having to like show off for a new person, then I feel comfortable to like just be able to settle in. And like, you know me, like in larger group settings, I don't talk. I just sit there and watch people.
Mhm.
And I feel like a lot of people who maybe know me superficially would be like, that doesn't seem like him at all, because I talk a lot
Yeah.
whenever I don't know people very well.
Yeah.
But I feel like my natural state is very like repressed, just kind of sit there and watch people, just do my own
Yeah.
thing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I know. I'll come over to you and I'm like, "What you doing in the corner?"
Oh yeah, you poke me. But no, I mean, is there anything else that you want to go over on this? Because I think that was actually really insightful. That was good.
Yeah, I feel pretty good on
Beautiful.
all of that.
So yeah, I mean, I actually would love at some point to do like another that has like nothing to do with business or work, or maybe it could just be about some random bullshit stuff, because I
Yeah.
feel like we talk well
Yeah.
as well. That's the better
Yeah.
way. We converse. Yeah.
I think we do better with that. If you didn't pick up on the beginning of this, get really nervous when we just dive into pulling apart my life. If it's natural where we can just go back and forth and be like, "Hey, what's your philosophy with this and this?" That's awesome. But you were like, "Here, Megan, here's a spotlight." I was like, I hate every single moment of this.
It's either me get the spotlight or you get the spotlight, and that's the situation I'm not to get.
You said before you started, you were like, "You're gonna be triggered by this because we're gonna have to take the floor." I was like, I hate this so much.
No, all right, before we end this, I am gonna let you plug yourself though, so you can get the spotlight one more time. Just talk about where people can find you.
Instagram will be the best place for people to find me, and my handle is Megan Davis 6 because my cell phone number used to be number 6.
Davis personal training, or no, it's Megan clinical training, Megan's PT, Phoenix 6.
Yeah,
I think those are all like relatively easy to remember, but you don't have to remember the first two anymore. Awesome. No, thank you so much, Megan. And obviously I'll put that stuff in like the show notes and caption stuff so people can find you and they can work with you if they want. But I really, again, appreciate you doing this with me.
yeah. Thanks for having me on. This was fun.